Good afternoon to you all. Dober dan, I should say. We have the great pleasure and honor to welcome you to this keynote speech session of our conference of today on the future of the European Union, our RECONNECT conference, which already had 2 successful panels this morning and will still have 2, hopefully, as successful panels in the afternoon. But now we are extremely delighted and honored to count with us the distinguished presence of a Vice President of the European Commission, Dubravka Šuica, who is Vice President of the Commission for Democracy and Demography. And let me just say a very few introductory words to highlight what an extremely distinguished person is with us this afternoon. Maybe a few words about her career. She started her political career as a mayor of her hometown, Dubrovnik in Croatia, where she held that office from 2001 to 2009. She also served for 3 terms as a member of the Croatian Parliament between 2000 and 2007. From 2004 to 2012, she was elected as one of the vice presidents of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities of the Council of Europe, a body aimed at promoting local and regional democracy and strengthening self-government of regional authorities. She was first elected to the European Parliament in the year 2013, and those of you who know your European integration history know that that is also the year of Croatia's accession to the European Union, and she was re-elected to the Parliament in 2014 and 2019. And of course, when we say 2019, we all know that that is the start of the Commission von der Leyen. And so in the same year, she was nominated to the Commission and took up her current role of Vice President for Democracy and Demography. The responsibilities of Ms. Šuica in the Commission are quite interesting because they include a number of important areas, such as the European Pillar of Social Rights, rights of the child, aging and social protection systems, and also supporting areas affected by brain drain and assessing the impact of demographic change. Finally, and of course of special interest for our RECONNECT project, Vice President Šuica leads the work of the Commission on deliberative democracy and more specifically on the conference on the future of Europe. The Vice President's keynote is entitled A New Push for European Democracy, the Conference on the Future of Europe, and I'm very much convinced that this keynote will give us all the opportunity to be enlightened on how the Commission is aiming to be involved in the conference on the future of Europe, but also really to reconnect, if I may use that term, to Europe's citizens, in that sense also striving towards the goal of our RECONNECT project. Madam Vice President, you have the floor. I will disappear from the video now, so everybody is watching you, and we will be listening very, very carefully. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Wouters. Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you, RECONNECT project, and thank you to your coordinator, the Catholic University of Leuven, for organizing this, if I may say, timely event. I'm impressed at how RECONNECT brings together researchers across 18 universities in 14 European Union and non-European Union countries. This is ambitious work as you actively feed into policy in the European Union. It is a part of what drives you in efforts to build a new narrative for and between the European Union and its citizens. As Vice President for Democracy and Demography, I can say that we are currently witnessing interesting moments in this portfolio. Democracy and demography do not exist alone in vacuum. They are cross-cutting and complementary. We must be open to sharing our knowledge based on concrete evidence in our bid to optimize our policy making in the interest of all citizens. By entrusting one commissioner to lead the work of the college in these two areas, President von der Leyen made an interesting connection. My mission letter highlights the aim of strengthening the links between people and the democratic institutions that serve them, to narrow the gap between expectations and reality. We must find different ways to get to know our citizens better, to establish trust, to establish solidarity, to have a frank exchange on how we can work better together, of course. Knowing the impact of demographic change contributes to this. In this context, let me say a few short words about my work on demography. Demographic change is about people and their lives. Addressing demographic change is key to building a fairer and more resilient society. I work with all my colleagues, commissioners, to ensure that our policies take account of the implications and impact of demographic change. Hence, the necessity of producing the Commission's first ever report on the impact of demographic change within the first 6 months of our mandate on 17th of June. The report relies on hard evidence and comparable data at European Union and regional level. It brings out the major impacts of demographic change, such as an economic growth, labor markets, health and long-term care needs, of course, needs for health and long-term care, and public finances. We now have a valuable reference for our current and future work. If you have not already done it, I invite you to visit our dedicated website. You can find lots of information. In addition to this report, we will present a green paper on aging, looking at issues like intergenerational solidarity and impacts on the labor market. We will also publish a long-term vision for rural areas designed to help rural areas in meeting challenges such as depopulation, connectivity, and limited access to services. Both reports are planned for adoption in 2021. We are also starting to think about how to examine the input, how to examine the impact of loneliness and isolation. All these issues are made more visible by epidemic or pandemic of COVID-19. So the COVID-19 pandemic shows us the importance of solidarity. The European Commission has proposed a clear, structured plan to lead us out of the crisis and into sustainable long-term economic growth based on green transition and digital transformation. The recently announced comprehensive package of European recovery, with this overall budget of 1.5 trillion euros, this budget of 1.85 trillion euros will help Europe recover and support multiple European sectors as we emerge from the period of constraint. Major initiatives like Next Generation EU will boost the European budget in the first crucial years of the recovery and contribute, together with a reinforced budget for 2021 to 2027, to making it sustainable, inclusive and fair. Together, we will exit this crisis. Dear ladies and gentlemen, and now on democracy. Democracy is a word often used, but its meaning is not always clear. A working definition could describe democracy as a means of collective decision-making where all are equal. Pure democracy is sometimes described as terrifying, especially in terms of the tyranny of the majority. But we do not live in a pure democracy. Our representative democracy has worked well, but it is not without fault. Some say it's not responsive enough, or is too mechanical, or not inclusive enough. Should we get rid of it? Certainly not. Crises like the current pandemic often force us to come up with new ideas. Our report on the impact of demographic change highlights how our society has changed. We therefore need new thinking. We cannot solve new problems with outdated ways of looking at the world. Politics has changed, and we are no longer business as usual. An endeavor like the Conference on the Future of Europe is a sign of new thinking at the European level. It will provide a new space to engage and involve all Europeans, to discuss key topics, to listen and to inform. It will complement representative democracy and increase trust in our democratic institutions. The conference comes at a moment when we need our democratic institutions most, but we need them to work well. And where they don't work well, we need to improve and connect. The conference will help tackle the twin challenge of democracy and demography and ensure that our systems of government and participation are dynamic, resilient, inclusive, and represent the diversity of the society. We need to address the root causes of problems and, if possible, avoid a geography of discontent. Surely, no one present online today could have imagined the multiple effects of COVID-19 across our European Union. This crisis shows that democracy and the institutions that underpin that democracy and institutions that underpin the democracy have a key role to play. We understand that citizens' trust in democracy cannot and should not ever be taken for granted. Citizens have been asking for greater participation in policy making, and we must learn and listen. To be clear, the conference is not about one particular personality, about one particular institution, region, or member state. The conference belongs to all of us, from citizens to civil society, to businesses, to national parliaments, regions and local authorities, to universities, to think tanks, and of course, politicians and decision makers. We need to strengthen our representative democracy by offering an opportunity for enhanced deliberative democracy. We need to consolidate our partnership approach. Here, the European Parliament, the Council and Commission must lay the ground for the conference. The most recent development is that Council has adopted its position, as had the European Parliament and the Commission. We can now take next steps to launch the conference. We need to first adopt a joint declaration by the European Parliament, Council and Commission, setting the structure, scope and main principles of the conference, and establish principles for those wanting to become our partners in this joint exercise. Prior to coronavirus outbreak, I was on a listening tour of the European Union. I had planned to visit 27 member states in the first 6 months of my mandate, but I managed to visit only 10 of them. In my missions, I was focusing on national and regional examples of participation and deliberation in democracy, because getting the feedback mechanism right is key for the Conference of the Future of Europe. So this is something which differs conference from some other conventions and some other conferences. Feedback mechanism of the process is important and a missing element in citizens' dialogues. We must ensure that citizens can see the impact they have had on policy making. This will be our benchmark for success. President von der Leyen has committed to ensuring follow-up, and I intend to see it through. We need to make sure that ideas found in local discussions can be discussed at the European level and eventually brought to the attention of the democratic institutions of the European Union. We must make space for citizens to discuss the topics that they consider important. Having already held many dialogues with citizens, I'm convinced that issues such as healthcare and the European Union's response to the public health crisis will have a prominent role. We have never thought about this before this pandemic, but now I'm sure that this will happen. Other important topics are linked to the political guidelines of the European Commission, such as the green and digital transition, an economy that works for people, social fairness, European rights and values, or European Union's role in the world. Another strand of discussion will focus on how to strengthen democratic processes governing the European Union. Other topics might be raised, as citizens must remain free to discuss all issues that matter to them. So, of course, citizens are free to raise any topic in this conference, and this is how we look at it. To make it easier for all citizens and partner organizations to contribute to the conference, we are setting up an online multilingual digital platform that will ensure full transparency of debates. Principles and guidelines will also be provided for those wishing to organize events under the umbrella of the conference. This platform is important because new technologies have brought new challenges. It may increase interaction between citizens and politicians. That's, of course, positive. However, misinformation is now spread and amplified much faster, much easier. This undermines trust and puts our basic values at risk. We have seen how populist and anti-democratic narratives have recently increased. A tool like our online platform will be an one-stop shop for all citizens and partners to get reliable, fact-based information. We are also working on key principles to structure debates and citizens' contributions in a meaningful way. Every voice counts. So I insist that the Conference of the Future of Europe must be representative of geography, gender, age, socioeconomic background, and level of education of citizens. It must also be inclusive of minority populations. All are part of Europe's diversity. Most of all, I believe that predetermining the outcome of the conference would cause more damage to democracy than if we did nothing at all. Of course, guidance is necessary in order to structure the debate, to allow citizens to discuss and give us feedback. This does not restrict the issues for discussion. It does not preempt the outcome. We must take our time to reflect on the best way of actually doing deliberative democracy at European level. But we do not need to have answers to all these questions before we launch the conference. We must continue to fine-tune and adapt as we go along. After all, this reflection should not be limited to the 2 years of the conference and could become an open channel. This could in the end become an open channel for citizens and democracy. This process is important because it has the potential to lay the ground for a new type of politics, for a new dynamic between representative democracy and citizens for generations to come. Certainly not to replace representative democracy, but to complement it. Make it more robust. Citizens do not always have sufficient tools to actively participate in politics. This can lead to a loss of faith in democracy. The conference is not a panacea for all ills, but it is an important step forward in addressing the issues currently facing democracy. Given recent increase in waves of hate speech against minority groups, including Asian, migrants, Roma, Jews, and Muslims, it is important that people can have their trust restored in a democratic system that listens and responds to them. We must continue to invest in our democratic systems, time, energy, money, and political will. The European Union's framework programs for research and innovation have made significant investments in the study of democracy and governance. Last year, the Commission published a policy review on EU-funded research on democracy that enriches our knowledge about the functioning or failings of democracy and indicates that reform of democracy and its policies cannot be based on intuition, opportunism, or pure power seeking. It has to be based on sound reasoning and empirical facts. We in the Commission share this conviction. The European Union, as a result, funds research in the social science and humanities. Without this research, it would be all but impossible for us politicians and decision makers to successfully address issues of democratic trust, legitimacy, and governance. This research provides us with vital scientific knowledge, data, and evidence-based recommendations. The Future Research and Innovation Program, Horizon Europe, will build on providing greater focus and resources by further strengthening the support to democracy and governance research. Specifically, Cluster 2 of the program, Culture, Creativity, and Inclusive Society, will have its own intervention dedicated to democracy and governance. It aims to support and strengthen core democratic values, to foster awareness and exercise of democratic rights, enhance active citizenship and effective governance at all levels. It will also look at responsiveness, accountability, and inclusiveness. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, our political system is primarily based on inputs and outputs. Politicians and various organizations lobby for the interest of their constituents and members. These are inputs. Based on these, politicians and governments then make policy. The result is outputs. But what happens in between is key to ensuring citizens benefit from these policies. To learn more about this, it is essential that innovative social science research provide fact-based neutral analysis, devise innovative solutions to improve democratic systems, and assist in the formulation of the evidence-based policy. I will end by reminding you why we are having the Conference on the Future of Europe. It is for the current and next generations of Europeans. You know that children make 20% of the European population, meaning approximately 90 million people in the European Union are children. President von der Leyen declared that we need to invest more in the future of our children. We need to act. And we are preparing, as you might know, a new comprehensive European strategy for the rights of the child. This strategy will call for the active participation of children in the European Union's democratic life, thereby strengthening the role of children in our Union's present and future. Therefore, structured children's dialogues will be an integral part of the conference. Dear ladies and gentlemen, citizens will play a leading role in building a more resilient, sustainable, and fair union. Together, citizens and democratic institutions, on the basis of solidarity and our common present and future, will find ways to give Europeans a greater say on how the European Union works for them. Like Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. So let us have the courage to embrace this innovative opportunity and make a success of the Conference on the Future of Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice President, for this wonderful keynote, which contained a lot of important messages, not only on the Conference on the Future of Europe, but also touching on quite a number of the other issues on which you are doing important work, such as the demography, the rights of the child, and the involvement of all kinds of actors and stakeholders in the European project. Now, Madam Vice President, we know that your time is very much taken, and we of course have no ample time for discussions, but if you would allow me to just deduce from the chat box that we have and from which a number of questions emerged, would I be able to ask you maybe 2 questions before we close this session? I will pose them at once so that you can reflect a little bit about them. One question has to do with the outcome of the Conference on the Future of Europe. Do you expect that the conference will, in the end, be able to make concrete suggestions also, if possible, for treaty amendments? We know that we live in a European Union that in the past, at least in the past, say, 30 years, has seen more or less every 6 or so years a new treaty coming up. We had Maastricht, we had Amsterdam, we had Nice, we had Lisbon. And the question is, will this be an opportunity for new treaty amendments? I'm asking you the question because we are now also aware of the Council position that was agreed last week, and that apparently says that the conference result will not as such bind the European Council into any treaty changes. Apparently this is still freely in the hands of the European Council when they will see the final report of the conference in the spring of 2022. So that's the first question, is a question of the outcome and whether treaty amendments are possible or unlikely in your view. A second question that we gauged from our participants has to do with, indeed, this question of involvement, active involvement of citizens, civil society, and experts in the dynamics of the conference. You have touched upon that in your keynote, but could we maybe ask you more personally, how do you see that role in an active manner, and not just say the virtual participation on a platform, but the actual interaction in the dynamics of the conference? To what extent will indeed there be a real active role by civil society and by citizens movements, by experts? I'm asking you also because indeed when you read the council position, it looks very much that the conference will be firmly in the hands of European institutions, member states, and parliaments, also national parliaments, on equal terms. But we don't see in the council's terms that there is any real role for citizens or for civil society actors. So we would be happy to hear your views on that. So these are our two questions with which we would like to entrust you.
Thank you for your questions. First on treaty and treaty amendments. I have to remind you of political guidelines of President von der Leyen. And you know that she said she is ready to follow up on what is debated and agreed during the conference, including by legislative action if appropriate. So this is what she said during her inaugural speech in July last year in the European Parliament. And then it was written in her political guidelines. So as I already said, I believe that we should not preempt any outcome of the conference. If we do that, we are not respecting the consultation process, but setting objectives before we have even started. So as part of the conference, we should address topics, which I haven't mentioned in my keynote speech, related to democratic processes and institutional matters, notably the lead candidate system for the election of the President of the European Commission and transnational lists. The Commission does not have the competence to table proposals in this field, you know, therefore its role is that of, if I may say, facilitator or honest broker between the European Parliament and the Council. So we, as Commission, we stand ready to make available legal and institutional expertise, research on electoral processes, and insight into interinstitutional relations if it is deemed useful by Parliament and Council. So, and above all, my colleague, Vice President Vera Jourova, is working specifically on this institutional strand of the conference. So it is her power. Maybe you can invite her as a keynote speaker on this. Regarding regarding your second question, regarding civil society and experts in the context of the conference. As I told you, this is why do we organize it? As I told at the in the ending of my keynote speech, was that we want to give a greater say to our citizens. We have to reflect together on what type of Europe we all of us want. We want to reconnect, as your title says, people with Europe, provide a sense of common identity, give all voices the opportunity to be heard, and empower, as I said in the end, empower younger citizens in particular. This time as I said, we want to reach citizens from all walks of life and all corners of the European Union. This is the reason why I mentioned geography of discontent. We don't want geography of discontent. And we would also like to reach to those who never engage with European institutions. So I'm sure that we cannot succeed alone in this exercise, if I may so. So civil society organizations will be a key partner. We need to find creative ways to engage in meaningful discussions with citizens, and I see civil society organizations as the bridges that will help us connect the conference with the citizens, and I count on your active contribution once the conference is launched. You know that it was envisaged to be launched on 9th of May, but it couldn't be, not because of two reasons. One was Council's position, another was COVID, but looking forward to September. You mentioned also experts, and they are fundamental. For the first time, we are organizing an open, inclusive, transparent and structured debate with citizens across Europe. So we need experts' advice to get this complex process right. I started consulting experts from the beginning of my mandate. Before COVID-19 hit, I had started, as I said, a listening tour to engage with citizens and experts from all over the European Union. As I said, I visited 10 member states and I found many successful experiences in participatory democracy. For example, we were in Belgium, where we found this this example of the democracy. Then we were in many different parts of Spain, in Latvia, in Estonia, in Czech Republic, in France. So we found many different best examples which could be used here. Since the confinement measures, I have continued this tour virtually, and I'm looking forward to listen also to your suggestions. For example, how to design a feedback mechanism ensuring that what is debated by the citizens can have a concrete impact on EU policy making. This is a crucial aspect for the success of the conference. This is what differs the conference from previous conventions and citizens' dialogues. Sorry, I couldn't remind of the name of the city in Belgium. It was Eupen in Belgium, where we found this Burgerraad, which is small conference on the future of Europe. So this is how I answered to your second question. I think you can help us a lot. Experts can help us a lot, and we have to. But as I said, Commission cannot put proposals. It's up to Parliament and Council. But we are ready to be facilitators, and I'm sure that together we can succeed. And as I said, it is envisaged to end in 2 years' time, but it may be a lasting and constant process between politicians and citizens, which I think will happen in the end. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice President, for so openly answering these 2 questions. We know that time is basically up, and we are very grateful for your speech and for your answers, and especially also we will take up your suggestions to engage further with you and with the Commission and with the whole process of the conference, and especially also think of creative ways on how indeed we can make sure that first of all, citizens engage that are not necessarily already engaging with the European project. We know very much that we have to go beyond, let's say, the bubble. It's a very actual word right now in the COVID crisis. We have to go beyond the bubble. We have to reach out, as you say, to all corners of the European Union, especially to those groups of citizens who don't really engage until now with the European project. And you can really count on us on the RECONNECT project to continue to engage with you and with your colleagues with the view to making the conference on the future of Europe a great success. Thank you so much, and well, we look forward to further engaging with you in the near future. Thank you again.
Thank you, Professor Wouters. Thank you all participants. Thank to all participants, and I'm sure that this is only the beginning of our cooperation, and I would like to see you in person better than virtually.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
And for our participants, we will reconvene at 2:30 for the next panel, the third panel, which, as you know, will focus on the very important judgment of the German Constitutional Court on the so-called PSPP case. So we reconvene at 2:30. See you then. Thank you very much.